drinks a lot, he'll keep you on your toes. It's the Eric Miranda Show. When he drank a lot, he would fight a lot. He might punch you in your nose. It's the Eric Miranda Show. There are people who would tell you he is crazy, but if you listen closely, he's unbelievable. He used to drink a lot, now he talks a lot. He'll keep you on your toes. It's the Eric Miranda, Eric Miranda, Eric Miranda Show.
That's right. It is the Eric Miranda Show, and I'm your host, Eric Miranda. How'd I not see that coming? What is up, everyone? I have a very special guest tonight. I'm really excited about this. I think my microphone needs Viagra or something. This could be tragic, folks. I'm going to have to kind of like have it in my way or something. What is it? Look at this. Technical difficulties, man. I don't like this. I messed with a bunch of stuff. I rearranged a bunch of stuff, and this is what happens. All right, so tonight, guys, I am Ms. Schlossberg, who then became Ms. Tuvey, hated me in high school and in sixth grade because I hated science. I hated her, and I guess maybe that resentment stuck with me, and I never really got over it. So I am going to invite my next guest on in a minute. I just want to tell you a little bit about him. His name is Gethyn Jones. I met him through his wife, Lori, who many people who watch this show know. They live in London. I think they met in 2000. If I'm incorrect, that is, I'll have to apologize. The summary of this is 33 years of physics teacher, but that's not quite all of it. Gethyn was born and raised in, now get this is why I hate Wales. No, I don't hate Wales. This is why I can't stand speaking. When you go to Wales and you read street signs, you think it says Llangollen, but it actually means Llangollen. So he is from Carnarvon, which is in North Wales, pronounced Caernarvon. His parents were Welsh speakers, so Gethyn didn't actually learn English until he started school at age 5. And he remembers being really excited because this meant he would finally find out what the TV people were saying. How cool is that? I have plenty of cousins and friends who grew up without TV because they were strict Catholics. And it can make you a weird person. You need to know what's going on TV in order to hang with the other kids. So Gethyn graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Philosophy from the University of Hull, specializing in the philosophy of science. His dissertation was on the concept of action at a distance in Newton's Principia. You like that little Italian thing? Principia. All right. He went on to complete his PGCE and diploma in physics at Swansea University. This is similar to a master's degree in the States. And that qualified him to teach physics. His first teaching post, get this, in other words, Lampeter Comprehensive School in Dyfed, West Wales, Welsh name, Ysgol Gethyn Flan Bedpronosteffen. Okay, so this is what we're up against here. The good news is he did learn to speak English at age 5, and I'm assuming he's been speaking English ever since. He's been speaking English at least since I've known him. We met in Northern England when he and his wife and some other friends, we were on the Irish Sea. Now, I make it sound like we were frolicking in the frothy, breaking waves, but we were actually in a stinky hotel and a theater. So it wasn't like we were, enjoying the sunshine on the beach. It was actually October and pretty nasty. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Gethyn Jones. What is up, Gethyn?
Just the usual.
You're just a gigolo.
Yeah, that's me.
That's you. Anyway, so Gethyn, it's good to see you. I mean, I hear your voice in the background a lot when I speak to Lori. But hey, here you are, and I'm excited that here you are. So let's jump in on this. So you're, when I was researching your resume and just knowing you, I thought this was going to be a lot. I gave myself 3 or 4 days. And then author. You are an author. You write, you have a physics blog called physicsteacher.blog. and you are a writer in Explicit and Direct Instructions. Is that what it's called?
Yep.
Those links are in. If you expand the link in the post for this show, anybody who wants to get a hold of this stuff, you can click the link and it'll open up where it says more. And cracking key concepts in secondary science. Now, you also talk about pedagogy, which is Jeffrey Epstein's binoculars. We all know that. And yeah, one time somebody said, "Where did he get cocksacky?" And somebody said, "Under his ball sacky." Maybe that's inappropriate. But Lori encouraged me to tell dick jokes. I have a couple of science high-minded versions of dick jokes. You ready? Let's start with this one. When researching Newton, I found out that he read a lot of Apollonius, the Greek philosopher. The closest I could get was Apollonia from the Prince days. But now this may seem irrelevant. However, oh, guys, I blew it. I had a picture of her when she was older. I was going to say gravity is real, but I blew it. It's not in the file. There you have it. And then I also, this is the best I could do on, Kepler. It said Kepler. I'm sorry. Okay. So, Kipper the dog is not necessarily. All right. So let's jump into this. I want to talk about the pedagogy. I don't fully understand it. I know what, I mean, I have a vague idea of what it means, but I want to know, I read your blog on it. Fascinating.
Thank you.
I don't know. Let's talk a little. Let's start with the blog. Let's talk. So, pedagogy is the difference between application of knowledge and
I think of it as more as the science of teaching. Um, Although it could be argued we're not quite at the scientific stage of teaching yet, because a lot of it is still poorly understood. Well, at least by me, and it's simply effective techniques of teaching. That's essentially it.
okay. Now, is this? I've read books by like David Hawkins about like kinesiology and these ultimate goals that we have as humanity. Is this an ultimate goal of humanity to perfect teaching?
It would be nice if we got better at it,
Okay.
and I think we're kind of at the same stage as kind of when the most advanced science was being a blacksmith. So you have a good understanding of how to handle metals practically, and if you hammer it for this long, then it'll behave in this sort of way. But an understanding of why hammering makes a piece of iron harder had to wait until basically atomic theory and the science of metallurgy. So
Right.
I think we're in that kind of grey no man's land where there's some sound scientific knowledge, but again, the way teachers work is kind of more akin to the way blacksmiths used to work, kind of traditional trade knowledge being passed down. Kind of,
Right, as opposed to understanding the science behind it. Okay, now I'm going to ask this, and please don't take this the wrong way, but does it really fucking matter if it works? And I obviously in science we want it to progress and we want it to become, but like like music theory is a real thing, right?
yeah,
And I know a bit of it, and knowing my relative minors versus the major chords, that's important. But then there are guys who don't know anything about it, who pick up a guitar and you weep.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I obviously as an educator, now look, my dad said, Eric, you always learn the hard way. So
Yeah.
so what is is there a path? Like, are there people who are refining how we're learning?
I would say so, yes. Um, I've come across some fascinating research, which, I kind of stumbled across it and thought, wow, that looks really, really good. I kind of ran with some of the suggestions they made, and I found they were highly effective. And a lot of my blog is simply sharing uh, kind of the trial runs of the theories that I've kind of tried out with real life students, and I think are effective.
Right.
So again, it's is it's a question of I guess ratios and proportion because it's disturbing to me how wide how wide skepticism, extreme skepticism about science is, and science is simply our best understanding of the universe as we currently know it.
Right.
Is it set in stone? No. Uh, it's not perfect by any means,
Right.
but it is a work in progress.
So when you talk about these learning methods and how to teach, is it really as it applies to science, or are you just talking in general as an educator?
I think it applies more to science because that's my field of specialism. And it's kind of things like how the human mind works, because the human mind seems to be composed of modules. And if you understand how the modules of the mind kind of interact, I think that's helpful. One of the amazing insights which I feel I've gained by reading research is the idea that everything is founded on what is termed embodied cognition, that we can't make sense of how the human mind works unless we think of ourselves as physical organisms in physical space.
Okay.
And most of the metaphors that we present to understand things are based on manipulation. I
Right.
can't get a handle on that idea. Everything, there's a physicality hard baked into the way we think, I think.
Now, Elon Musk, Neuralink,
Mhm.
where does this fall? I mean, obviously, people are starting to manipulate objects and physical reality uh, by thinking. Is there a certain amount of what you're talking about that is being mapped out in hardware like Neuralink?
There could be, but I'm not sure how successful it's going to be because I'm not sure how similar the wiring of each brain is. There are similarities without a doubt, but I haven't read up on the research and I don't know. Um, I think it is a growth area, but again, it's kind of like we may get to do it really well and then think, well, what was the point of that? It's kind of the reason we're still using QWERTY keyboards.
Right,
Originally, the QWERTY layout was because certain letters kept jamming
right.
when they were used often if they were arranged alphabetically.
And it was also,
Now,
I think it was
yeah,
on the first Edison dictation machine, and Edison was a master marketer.
yeah,
And it's kind of like why we're still using AC/DC or whatever his method was versus Tesla's, right?
yeah,
Um, but you actually we may run into a problem as you're learning to better educate people. And then with Neuralink, you say not every brain wires the same. So
yeah.
are we limited as to how much we can master or perfect teaching based on? I mean, I'll give you an example. I was I'm not allowed to use the R word anymore, but I was considered a dumb kid by my
Hmm.
teachers, by some of my friends, not by my parents. My father understood better than anyone that I just was always thinking differently than other people, and I had no
Yeah.
time for nonsense. But I finally started to learn how to learn when I started playing drums at age 12. I remember picking up the
Mm,
sticks and being like, "Oh, I can do this. Oh, I like this. Oh,
yeah,
that's math. Wow, I just have to divide this whole note, down to 30 seconds,
yeah,
and everything in between." And so I learned by being a grandstander. I wanted to be I wanted to play a big loud instrument. I wanted to be
yeah,
noticed. So it was almost my insecurities. And I really wanted to shove it up certain teachers' arses, as you'd say, on your side of the pond.
yeah.
And that
I
was
mean, when you listen to Roger Waters, what is it? Well, Pink Floyd, The Wall, is a hymn of hate against teachers,
yeah,
really.
leave those kids
So,
alone. Right. Well, but to
oh
a
my
certain
goodness me, yeah,
and we take that as like a rebel yell almost, right? But in
yeah,
reality, there were teachers whom I mean, I have friendships with some of my teachers from grammar school and on Facebook here, and I'm friendly with them because they understood me from the get go. But there are teachers who I've run into over the years who really they're thick as two wooden planks nailed together, you know,
Yeah.
and all the education in the world doesn't change that. But I had to learn a certain way. Now I have another interesting thing. One of my friends, his motivation for becoming very successful was he came from a broken home. His family always struggled. He wanted to buy his mom a house,
Yeah.
and he did. And he may have bought her several. His motivation coming from nothing was his motivation for being
Yeah.
successful. And other people grow up poor and remain poor. Other people grow up rich and become poor. You know what? So
Yeah.
how do you refine this if we don't know? Do you know the Myers-Briggs tests, the personality? Like, so if you look at the things that make me tick versus you, I'm an expressive. I would imagine you're an analytical, according to those neighborhoods.
I'm not sure. I don't think I've ever had it applied.
So with the indexes they do in the industrial
Yes.
psychology test, they put people in neighborhoods like expressive, driver,
Mm,
analytical, and amiable. And they all have like
mm,
great qualities, but they function differently. And the name of the game when you take these, when you have these consultants come into these corporations, is you want to kind of adjust your indexes and your neighborhood style, your
mm.
personality style to the other people. So by nature or by science or by their science, you and I will learn differently. Like if you say,
True.
Eric, let's go do a burlesque show, and I don't know anything
Mm,
about burlesque, I'll start putting on
mm.
the costume and figuring it out as I'm dancing. Do you guys,
Yeah.
everybody, who's wondering what I would look like in a burlesque outfit? And you'd be like, okay, I need to know everything about it. What year was it started? Again, I'm making.
I don't think that's necessarily true because we alter our approach according to what the problem is. So I think we're all adaptable. We have certain favored techniques, generally the ones that have worked for us in the past.
Mhm.
But again, we're individuals are quite malleable. If one way doesn't work, you usually figure out to try another way fairly quickly and see if that works.
And look, based on me adjusting my personality or neighborhood style to you're absolutely correct. But is there an optimum way for each personality to learn? And that, that becomes, and I'm fascinated to see how you would narrow that down, how to really zero in on the optimal for everyone.
I think the optimal for everyone is more teaching by using sets of examples because all too often we present definitions,
Mhm.
whereas the idea of an actual concrete real example is usually far more powerful for most people. Kind of, you can tell, oh, what's the famous example? Something like a reticulated assemblage, and it's how the word net was defined in the first, what was it, 1700 dictionary of the English language.
Hmm.
And you can't make head or tail of it. But somebody shows you a picture of that, you go, right, got that. Yeah. And it's that idea of examples. And the other powerful thing is non-examples. You know, property X is this, this, and this, but this is not X. It's not X at all.
Right.
And that helps people
Eliminate.
develop an understanding. I think human beings live their lives by drawing inferences and sometimes incorrect inferences. We all do it.
Right.
It's just part of our nature. But again, we're inference machines. So if you can present people with sets of examples where they're more likely to draw correct inferences, I think that's the holy grail as far as I'm concerned.
Right. I just finished reading a book by a woman named Amanda Montell, and it was called Cultish. She also has a book called Something of Magical Thinking, and she's really about words and the words we use and the cult language and the way she has a thing that she calls thought terminating cliches.
Yeah,
So so if I say, like I would imagine that there were people who were probably calling Sir Isaac Newton a conspiracy theorist and a wacko because of how irreverent he was and how I heard a guy on a podcast. Yes, I was not into Newton before this interview. I'm just telling. I mean,
yeah,
I knew a little bit about him.
yeah.
But apparently, this one physicist was suggesting that Newton had a lot of his ideas and theories written out already, and it was only when his contemporaries were getting close to revealing certain things he would just publish it. And then
Yeah, the that happened a lot during the kind of dawn of science because there was no set way of establishing priority.
right,
So famous scientists used to do things like cryptic rhymes. I think one of the famous astronomers thought he saw rings around the planet Saturn, but wasn't uh, convinced enough to kind of say, "Oh,
say,
this planet has rings around it." So he
right,
wrote this cryptic verse. So
uh-huh.
if anyone else discovered it before him, he could say,
He'd be like,
"Ha
"Ah,
ha! I
remember
thought
my
of it
poem?"
first."
Right, he's like a regular Dylan Thomas.
And yeah, so establishing priority was really difficult.
I didn't.
Nowadays, it's all done via the internet. So now physicists, when it's published on a website called Archive, ARXIV,
Mhm.
that's when, yeah, they can point to that and point to the date and time of its publication and say, I thought of it first. Look, I put it on archive first.
Right, and instead of getting burned at the stake, you just get canceled if you're wrong,
Yes,
right? Yeah, cool.
ultimately.
So now I want to talk about now. I want to get into the science and thank you on the education thing. I guess I'm a little bit not combative, but I'm skeptical because if I were left in a traditional, I mean, I was left in traditional school, but if I had to
Mhm.
learn that way versus conversations versus music, just music,
Yeah, but
I would,
teachers do teach differently. Like some teachers favor a very conversational style, and they're probably the teachers who got you, and you're still in touch with them.
yeah.
So not everybody, but again, during the era when we grew up, it was more traditional sort of style teaching. The only thing I would say about education is, have you heard of the Flynn effect?
The Flynn effect
Yeah,
is it like Errol Flynn. I'm just kidding.
almost. No, no. It's the research that was showing that IQ scores have to be adjusted over time because I think the average IQ is always set at 100,
Hmm.
and gradually they are increasing them because human beings are being educated for longer in general,
Hmm.
spending more time in school, learning more things from different sources, and so they're getting gradually smarter. And this drift is kind of like widely accepted now. It's called the Flynn effect.
Uh-huh.
So you said you were regard yourself as a bit dumb. If we put you in a time machine and took you back to 1800, you would be in the
Brilliant.
top quartile
Well,
of people alive at that time
all right, now check this out.
because of your exposure to more ideas.
I wonder, and I'll tell you why. I read the book years ago, A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by
Yes.
Mark Twain.
Yeah.
Have you read the book?
I can't remember if I've read it, but I know the story. Yeah.
The movie's great. Bing
Yeah.
Crosby's great, but the book he really digs. He's got them on bicycles instead of horses.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. And I realized when I was reading that book, now I was 18 or 16 when I read it, but I realized when I read the book that I don't know shit. This guy knew more about, if I went back 200 years or 50, 500 years, the only thing I would know is that I'm in love with Mary Queen of Scots. There's nothing in other words, would I know how to scrape up the compounds needed to make gunpowder the way he did? He ends up shooting
Yeah.
Sir
But you
Lancelot.
just set up a mini recording studio.
No,
I watched you set it up now. And it's you learn the tasks that you need to be able to do. Have you ever heard of? I think his name is Osti.
Asti. Is he?
Osti was well, it was in the I think the Swiss Alps,
Mhm.
and they found a body, and bodies come out of glaciers
Oh,
like
yeah, yeah.
quite regularly because um,
And he was like a million years
hikers
old or
get
something?
lost and they get killed.
Yeah.
And as they examined it, they suddenly realized, hang on, this guy
Ancient.
is from the Stone Age.
Yeah, yeah, I saw that. Yep.
Yeah, and they looked at the kit that he carried with him. And when they examined it, he had a variety of tools, But what was significant was every tool was made out of a different form of wood,
Really?
and it was selected to be the best wood for that task,
Wow.
whatever it was. And
Wow.
so they had, you know, knowledge that they were raised with, that, they took in almost with their mother's milk. And it was just like stuff they carried around. And I think equally we have that. We're not dumbos or anything.
Mhm.
It's just we live in a very, very different time, in a very different civilization, and
Well,
we have different coping mechanisms.
so a few weeks ago, I got into the concept of time, and
Mhm.
people argue with me all the time that time is, they almost think it's built into being human,
Yeah.
when in fact we made it up. And before like 3500 BC, BCE for you atheists. By the way, what's that? Like, don't you love that? BCE, before the Common Era. It's like we have 26 letters in the fucking alphabet and you need to
Yeah.
steal two of them. Come on. BCE. Come up with some
Yeah.
totally, anyway. So before 3500 BC, we don't really know about clocks. I would
Yeah.
imagine that we had a better instinct as to where in the cycle of the day we were, right? In, the sunset, whatever.
Very true. Yeah.
And I wonder if that happens because you and I can go on Google and find out what the best wood would be to build that tool. Have we dulled our senses in terms of our intuitive ability to do what's his name again? The ancient
Ost-
man?
Oh, Osti, I think he's called.
Asti. Right. So did he have a natural instinct that we buried with information?
I think he just coped with, you know, essentially the internet of his day, which was people talking to each other. Don't use that wood for making that tool. You need to use this wood. That is
Mhm.
much better. And I just think it's just horses for courses. Human beings, I think, are very adaptable creatures, and you put them in an environment, and they soon learn how to get the best out of their environment by trial and error, usually.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
some people learn quicker and more effectively than others.
So do you think through trial and error, my mom knew that the oak wooden spoon would hurt the worst when she hit us with it?
Possibly, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
You might have tested them out, and you blotted them out.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know where the wire coffee pot cable came into the picture, but
Yeah,
that's all right. Now we're talking abuse. Hang on. All right. So now I want to ask you this.
yeah.
Your dissertation, concept of action at a distance in Newton's Principia.
I think it's called Principia because it's from Latin, not from
Listen,
Italian.
I heard a guy say Principia today, and I was like,
Yeah, yeah.
listen, but no,
They might they might be right.
he
Oh,
was.
if only a classicist nearby who we could ask.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, it's like I wanted to say Principia so badly, and now I'm being corrected. But I definitely, it was the same guy who told me about Newton's mother leaving him and
Yes,
his
yeah, yeah, yeah.
his eccentricities.
He was a seriously messed up man.
So, but this is what confuses me: is the concept of action at a distance in his, how'd you say it?
Principia.
Principia.
That's the way I've heard it pronounced. To be honest, I've no idea if it's the correct way.
It doesn't, it's six one half dozen the other.
Yeah,
What is so? But then now, was that part of his Principia?
it was because it had to be. But the thing was, at the time, that was regarded as magical thinking.
Right,
Two
because he's
objects can't possibly affect each other unless they're touching.
right. So
And this was regarded as a serious flaw in his theory of gravitation.
okay, so now he said, all right, said Newton considered action at a distance to be an inadequate model for gravity. Newton, in his words, considered action at a distance to be so great an absurdity that I believe no man who has in philosophical matters a competent faculty of thinking can ever fall into it. So I was confused because on the one hand, he needed it, but he said that, and he said it in a letter to Bentley. Fancy
Yes, yeah,
schmancy.
and yeah, he wrote obsessively about these things,
Mhm.
um, and essentially he couldn't figure out a way around it.
Right. So
And his calculations and his models were incredibly successful. including action at a distance, but he was never quite comfortable with it.
Right.
And I think Descartes um, came along and suggested that that there were invisible particles that
Mhm.
we couldn't access. I believe Descartes called it subtle matter,
Yeah.
which kind of push things
Speaking of
further.
invisible
Yeah,
objects, how come you don't pronounce the TES on the end of Descartes' name?
I don't know.
That's um,
It's a mystery known only to the
it's
French.
it's exactly. All right. So now, okay, this is something that blew me away. And again, I'm kind of excited to ask you about this and talk about this because I've never really. I mean, I'm just telling you, my my physics ignorance is incredible. It's bliss. I mean, the truth is, I've been happy until now. Now I feel like I have to like dig deeper. I was
Yeah.
listening to this one of those 3 podcasts I listened to in the past 2 days, and one of them was when I guess did Galileo throw the metal balls off the Leaning Tower of Pisa? It was
Possibly. It was one of his students, I believe.
he threw one of his students off the Leaning Tower of Pisa. I'm sure you've wanted to do that, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Occasionally, yeah.
so
No, one of his students
threw it
wanted
off.
to do the demonstration.
Well, what
Yeah,
was interesting is apparently this concept was in the hypothetical for years, and he was like, "Somebody throw the damn things over." It was like a
yeah,
short experiment. This is what fascinated me. We take gravity for granted, and I mean that. I don't mean that we don't get that it's there. I mean conceptually, I never understood why 2 different weighted objects, minus wind resistance in those cases, would fall at the same speed. And this guy explained it that, yes, the bigger ball has more gravitational pull, but it's a heavier object, so it has to be pulled with more energy.
yeah. With more force
And
to get it to accelerate. Yeah,
that was staggering to me, Gethyn. That was staggering because I'm like, wait a minute, this is actually pulling it to Earth, an energy versus it just fell. You see what I'm like? The
yeah,
concept that I suddenly saw like an electrical beam, actually like a tractor beam, pulling this thing in versus hey, shit falls,
yeah,
blew me away.
yeah, yeah.
So
It's a fascinating idea.
it really
It
is a
is,
fascinating idea,
and it freaks me out.
and I wonder
But
how many laymen like me are fascinated hearing that because I was like, wait a minute, gravity's actually a force. It's actually
well,
something pulling me.
yeah. On Newton's model, it's a definite force. Yes.
Mhm.
Einstein regarded it as a curvature in space-time, which makes my brain hurt. But there's freaky things even with Newtonian gravity. Like the prediction is if you drilled a hole right through the center of the Earth and dropped an object down that hole, how far would it fall?
Right, when would the gravity become neutralized? Would it be the
Yeah.
center?
It would be neutralized at the center, but at that point it would be moving so fast that it would continue
Right, and then
through towards Australia and then gradually slow down. So essentially, if you were able to drill this huge tube through the center of the Earth and you dropped an object, that object would oscillate backward and forward around the center of the Earth, which is
yeah,
totally freaky in my
that
idea.
is freaky, and, which brings me to something. There was a riddle years ago. It ended up being bullshit, and the riddle was a spy gets kidnapped in North America, and he's put in a room that's an identical replica of his home. He wakes up drugged and hungover, but he's in South America. And he goes into the bathroom, and before he leaves the bathroom, he realizes that he's on the other side of the equator. And the theory was that the drain spins differently. It doesn't. I've watched my drain.
Yeah, it doesn't.
I
It only affects very, very large bodies of water.
yeah.
So a bathtub or a sink isn't large
I mean,
enough. But
I've
if you
expressed
have a large lake or an ocean, yeah, yeah, it's there.
right. Got it. All right. So now this is a concept that I want to get into. So before physics or with physics, centuries ago, millennia ago, there was metaphysics.
Well,
And
actually, I disagree.
okay,
Metaphysics is called metaphysics because the content of which metaphysics considers was dealt with by Aristotle, and he happened to put it in his book in the chapter after his chapter on physics.
okay,
It
so
was literally called
okay,
metaphysics because it came after the
because
chapter on physics.
it was owned by Facebook, Meta.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
okay, in as we progress in science over the past, just the past century, there seems to be, now I don't have any, I didn't do a study on this, but in my world, I have seen the rise of metaphysical concepts. I've seen more metaphysical churches growing. I've seen New Age movement. I personally believe that affirmations are a powerful tool to improve your life, etc. Now, there are people who think, hey, you write an affirmation, you're more willing to do it. Other people believe that the electroneurons of the brain attract matter. You believe in invisible energies.
Yeah.
Gravity is measurable, it seems, but it's invisible. Where is your stance? I know you're a lifelong atheist. Where do you stand on the concept of, let's just say, thought creating physical matter?
Oh, I don't think it can
Okay.
because I think to create physical matter, you generally have to have a lot of energy, and it happens all the time, all around us. According to quantum physics, we live in a quantum foam where particles are coming into existence and winking out of existence all the time. So again, I think we overvalue what thought can do. Thought is incredibly valuable to us because we're thinking agents, and we're interested in what other people are thinking, and we've developed, language to try and get a grip of what other people are thinking. Um, but I don't think thought can necessarily create something, at least not within the human brain.
Okay.
It's just
What about
chemicals moving around in your brain.
all right? What about attracting matter? What about you have in the 19 aughts to the
Yeah,
30s, there were a lot of books written. Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. In the 18th century, you had James Allen as A Man Thinketh.
yeah,
Then you had the big boom, in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, like Norman Vincent Peale. And you have people who really, they're big proponents of these affirmations, affirming thoughts, etc. Again, this stuff was all brought up in this cultish book.
yeah.
So instead of thought limiting beliefs, or even if they are thought limiting cliches, the limit is that you believe in creating positive outcomes. And a lot of people who live by these principles seem to get these things. What would your take be on that? And I'm asking you this specifically,
Yeah.
not to challenge that you're an atheist, but to challenge, if science is so invisible, is these affirmations leading to people's success, is that a measurable thing if we actually cared to measure it?
Ooh, I think success is such a complicated metric that it just because you think that because you did X, then Y happened isn't necessarily the case because we're talking about very complex causal relationships there. Um, what I would say is, I've forgotten the name of the research who did this, but they tracked um, investors. And there was, I think during the 70s, there was this famous investor, and he was Midas. Everything he touched, everything he said happened. You know,
Mhm.
he was, you know, people thought he could walk on water. But when you tracked his career over his entire life, it reverted to the mean. He wasn't any better at guessing than anybody else.
Right.
It's just that he just was just lucky.
Lucky. All right.
And
So,
he had a sustained run of luck, which again, if it happens to you, fabulous, but you can't guarantee it.
I wonder if there's, I mean, I wonder if how many studies like that have been done.
Hmm.
So, all right, I'm going to challenge Newton. I'm going to challenge the whole scientific community on something.
Okay.
When we went from a geocentric to a heliocentric model of the universe,
Yeah.
religious people were out of joint. Our human arrogance was just blown up, right? And
Yeah.
I remember when I moved to Washington, D.C., when I was 18 years old, even though I grew up 24 miles from New York City, when I got to D.C., I was like, wait a minute, Channel 11 isn't everywhere? Like the news station, the TV, WPIX. I
Yeah.
couldn't believe it. I was blown away. I couldn't believe that the world did not revolve around the town I grew up in.
Yeah.
Then we call Newton's universal laws, right?
Yeah.
How do we know that the mathematics that we study with Newton, Galileo, etc., how do we know that this math applies everywhere in the known universe?
Um, Essentially through observation. You begin by making the assumption that it applies everywhere. You generate predictions, then you do observations, and so far observations have pretty much confirmed that our understanding is pretty solid, and it seems to apply everywhere that we can observe as far as we can tell.
Okay, I'll take that, but let me add this. So, what is the in the universal theory of gravity?
Yeah,
The diminishing gravity over distances, right? So when you
yeah,
double the distance, you don't get half the gravity, you get a quarter of the gravity, and so on.
yes.
Is there a scenario then where somewhere out in the universe where we haven't observed yet, from a distance, the whole thing just changes? And I know this is pretty abstract, and I'm not basing it on anything.
Yeah, it's been put forward as a theory. It was called modified Newtonian dynamics, and it was, I think, its heyday was in the 1990s, maybe a bit later.
Mhm.
But gradually, because of the predictions it made, they weren't supported by observations, and now we've moved to another model.
Okay,
But yeah, people
how
have suggested that all the time.
well, I feel even though my theory was incorrect according to the models, I feel pretty smart. I'm glad that I
Yeah,
was. I mean, I just felt prickly. Actually, I just wanted to be a dick and like challenge the scientific community. But the fact that other people have done that
yeah,
feels pretty good.
yeah.
By the way, you know how many things I've invented and I didn't pull the trigger on, and I'm like, geez, man, that guy's
Ah, yeah, I should have done
doesn't
that.
it?
Yeah,
One of my favorite. Okay, this is fantastic. This is one of those things that I can't believe somebody actually thought of it, then executed on it. And I thought it was a one off. And then I looked on the internet and it's not a one off. There was a guy shuffling to his shitty construction job or wherever he was going. And he looked hungover. You know that guy from Florida that's in every community. He's missing
oh
a
yeah,
tooth. He's got blonde hair, and he's
yeah,
drinks so much that he's skinny instead of fat. And
yeah,
his jeans are up with a belt buckle, and he wears work boots. And this guy was in Newark, New Jersey. I was picking up my son, and he's miserable. You could tell he's just going slow.
yeah,
And he had a big WB in a crest,
yeah.
and it said, "If you see the police, warn a brother." It was the Warner Brothers symbol.
Uh,
And I sat in my car laughing out loud that
yeah,
somebody didn't just think of this, but they thought that would be worth. Guess what? I went online. There's 30 different merchants selling it.
yeah,
So I'd rather that I would have put what is my model called? The Newton's diminished
Modified Newtonian dynamics.
modified Newton. All right, I'm glad to know that that's what I came up with. So, all right, now, so we have this universe. Okay, we're assuming based on the models that everything stays the same mathematically.
Yeah.
What do we know? Like, how far into the universe? Okay, so, and I'm just going to say this: the people who watch this show, a lot of my friends from high school don't believe we went to the moon. A lot of
Yeah.
my other friends ridicule people for not believing they went to the moon.
Yeah.
One of the reasons we don't talk politics on this show is I don't need World War III on my Facebook page.
Yeah.
Without getting into the moon landing, how critical is Newtonian theory, the theory, universal laws of gravity, in getting us to the moon and back? Like, is what he scribbled on a piece of paper?
Yes, his was the seed of the idea. But although he invented the branch of mathematics to actually use to sort out the problems associated with his theory, he was still in a very primitive state. So gradually it was built upon. So you couldn't go to the moon with what Newton suggested because his maths wasn't advanced enough. That's had to wait, a couple of centuries until it was advanced enough. But yeah, eventually they did the calculations and they were able to get to the moon essentially on Newton.
Right. So his math had to be refined in order for that to
Oh
work.
yeah.
Okay,
Oh
now,
yeah.
so this brings me to another point. I have heard, and again, I'm such a novice. I've been told, and I've read on the internets that certain parts of general relativity negate certain parts of Newton's universal laws of gravity. Is that
Yeah,
true?
they do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I hear that string theory negates some of general relativity, but now I'm hearing, oh, they're full of shit. They lied. There's this term now in politics, and again, we're not getting into politics, but I hear this thing science denier a lot.
Yeah.
And it seems absurd only because arguing with what a scientist says isn't necessarily science denying because everything is political. Did you know that the English wouldn't accept certain of Einstein's theories because he was German, and the Russians wouldn't accept certain Darwinian stuff because it was Western? So there's politics in science, let's be honest. But
Yeah.
isn't scientific advancement almost science denying in that we try to crush what established science is to refine it and better it?
Yes and no. I think it's kind of like, oh gosh, what's a good analogy? Completing a crossword puzzle. So when you've only got a few of the clues filled in, and you suddenly realize, hang on, I've got all 7 of the things I filled in wrong, although the word order fits. And the more you fill in, the more you can be convinced that, pretty much all the bits are right. I think we're at that stage in science, and it's not saying that there couldn't be a major transformation. It's just saying so far, based on on what we can observe, based on its success, most of the bits are probably right.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
And I
agree.
think scientific research happens at the edges, kind of stuff that people hadn't thought about or hadn't seen or hadn't observed, thinking, what the hell is this? How does this work?
Right. Yeah. We have, look, if you consider, when Thomas Jefferson gifted his library to the Library of Congress, it was a big deal because printed
Yeah.
word was so difficult to come by back then. We have
Yes.
so much information blasting all over that it seems there's like very few stones unturned. I mean, AI is obviously this new thing. And I agree with you that science has been working just fine, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But then I get into the manipulative sources of, like, when I was reading about the Russians not accepting Darwin because they were like, it's a Western abomination, all this, it starts to freak me out. Like, what do I actually know? I mean, look, when I throw something up in the air, if I put two different weighted balls and I throw them off the Leaning Tower of Pizza, yes, pizza, because Galileo is Italian.
Yeah.
If I mean, obviously, there's no arguing with the result, so I get that.
Yeah.
But what are there any major avenues in science where people are like, like what? Like in other words, like I mean, look, in Western civilization, we've been criticized, attacked as the U.S., as England, like as bad people. We have all this. Are our theories? Is math absolute?
Certainly it appears to be.
It appears
I
to be.
think that's, yeah, it seems to be generates, as long as you apply it correctly, it seems to generate right answers more often than it
Right.
generates wrong answers.
Right. Very
But
Orwellian,
again,
right?
yeah, it's what you put in. What's the phrase? Garbage in, garbage out.
Garbage out. Right. Right. No,
Garbage in
listen,
first,
I
garbage out
agree.
second.
But now I'm looking at, math as, I don't want to get into politics, but people are calling math, like some of these professors, and they're calling it like white supremacy and all this other stuff. And it's just like, that's Orwell. I mean, George Orwell said, if you beat somebody long enough, this plus this will equal 5 instead of 4. That's part of that book, 1984.
Oh, yeah.
But what would happen? Can you imagine if you and I woke up one day and found out that we were wrong and that in some abstract way, 2 plus 2 equals 5?
Yeah. It kind of might almost be interesting to discover that. It is, sorry, excuse me.
By the way, I just want to plug for Gethyn. It's
Yeah.
what is it, 1 a.m. right now where you are?
Yes, it's gone 1 a.m.
So that, again, so for anyone who watches this, you just have to understand this man is up in the middle of the night to do this because he's off tomorrow. He doesn't have to beat any kids tomorrow with his ruler.
My beating stick is in the cupboard.
Yeah, right. Okay, now I want to ask you a few personal questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Obviously, you're married to Lori.
Yep.
You met in 2000?
Oh, earlier than that. I think we were married. We've been married 27 years now. So,
geez, man, you make me feel old.
So,
I'm older than her.
Before that, say 29 years.
Now, did you meet at the gym?
No, we met in a pub.
You met in a pub. Okay. Now, do you work out like Lori does?
No, hardly at all. No.
Do you do any martial arts?
I used to, yes, a
Yeah.
while back.
Yeah, I've been taking jujitsu, and so Lori and I were talking about a double leg takedown.
Yeah.
But in New York City, here you got to be careful because you may end up a triple leg takedown, which is, pretty. That's the dick joke Lori was waiting for all night.
That was worth waiting for.
No, Lori said she wanted us to do potty humor, and I just knew it wasn't going that way. This stuff is too important to me. Let's end with Dylan Thomas because he was Welsh, right? And tell me about what happened. So I literally have cousins who weren't allowed to watch TV as kids, and it really made them odd kids, smart kids, but odd kids. What did Groucho Marx said? I think TV makes people smart. Every time someone turns it on, I go in the other room and read a book. So what was, before we get into a child's Christmas in Wales, what was it like to be 5, to speak Welsh, which is the only language I know that has 17 consonants next to each other and equals a vowel? Llangollen.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, W and Y are vowels in the Welsh language, so we have more vowels than you.
Yeah, and if sorry, so it would be A E I O U, and sometimes Y and W. See, there's two. That rhythmically, that just doesn't work for me.
Yeah. It needs some work.
All right. So what was it like? So culturally, right? Like, my kids, they're on the iPhones the whole bit, and I fight it and it annoys me, but there's also the part of me that knows that kids can become an outcast. What was it like getting to school, only speaking Welsh, learning English in real time as you needed it, and then discovering TV? What was like the first TV show you watched in English that you can remember?
Oh gosh, probably one of the kids' shows. I think Trumpton with the little stop motion animated puppets. Used to love that. And I think my very, very favorite television program as a kid was called Mr. Ben, which was just a storybook kind of idea with pictures shown on the screen and somebody reading a story. And there was one of the pictures when they introduced it of Mr. Ben dressed as an astronaut. And I used to spend the theme tune kind of going, please let it be the astronaut story. I haven't seen the astronaut story.
So is that it? Is that how it all started?
That's how it all started.
That's how all, so basically learning English at 5, watching English TV turned you into a physicist.
Quite possibly, yeah. I remember I was, at school with a bunch of other kids who just spoke Welsh. And,
all right. So okay, so you guys I see.
Just like,
all right.
It was just kind of the milieu I moved in. It was just the way things were.
Did any of the kids speak English before that? Like, did any of the kids?
Quite a few. It tended to be Welsh only. Just, not a political decision or anything. It's just the standard language, I guess.
Yeah. See, my parents would argue that I only spoke French until I was 5. Hey. And I did it with a Long Island accent. Hey. One of the earliest shows I remember watching was actually an Australian TV show called Skippy the Bush Kangaroo.
I remember that.
You're the only person who remembers that. And what was interesting about it, it popped into my head one day.
Yeah.
And I started singing Skippy, Skippy, Skippy the Bush Kangaroo. Right. And I remember that. And then I turned it on. I looked it up on the internet. It was there. And I had it in the right key. Isn't that amazing? 50-something years later, I was able to sing it in the original key that I heard it in. And and it was interesting because I was born in 65. I think it ran from 63 to 65. They must have done US reruns. And none of my siblings remembered it.
Yeah.
It was just like, you're the first. I mean, it's on the internet.
I remember it. I remember really enjoying it.
Yeah. It was totally cool, man. This, he was like a little bush kangaroo. He's awesome.
Yeah. I used to be able to communicate with humans somehow. So what's that, Skippy?
Yeah.
They're trapped down a well.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Now, have you seen any of these bigger marsupials fist fighting and throwing each other down ravines and stuff? Oh, there was one a couple of years ago. A kangaroo, big guy.
Yeah.
Put a guy's dog in a headlock. And the guy freaked out and squared off with the kangaroo and punched the kangaroo in the face. The kangaroo went like this and let go of the dog.
Yeah.
I don't want to fight a kangaroo.
No.
This thing was like 7 feet tall. And this guy popped him right in the nose.
Yeah.
Forget it. Not for me, man. Anyway, we're going to be wrapping this up. I want to, do you want to stay on with me while I show people the sitar version of the Eric Miranda show?
Why not?
Yeah, stay on with me, and then we'll say a proper goodbye. Let me.
Okay.
Just give me 1 second. This is and then we're gonna say goodbye. Just let's do this. This is Chris Rael, who I think, if I'm in town and doing the show next week, he may be my guest. And here, is it on? Yep, there we go. Let me just give it a start. Here we go. Chris Rael singing the Eric Miranda Show.
He used to drink a lot, now he talks a lot to keep you on your toes. It's the Eric Miranda Show. When he drank a lot, he would fight a lot. He might punch you in your nose. It's the Eric Miranda Show. There were people who would tell you he was crazy, but if you listen very closely, he's unbelievable. He used to drink a lot, now he talks a lot to keep you on your toes. It's the Eric Miranda show.
Yeah, there we go. Gethyn Jones. Gethyn, thank you so much for coming on. Honestly, thank you for staying on so late. I know this is a big deal. I hope you get to sleep in tomorrow. I hope
Absolutely, yes.
Are you a coffee drinker or are you a tea drinker?
Both.
I was going to say, don't just, because when English people say, oh, I don't drink coffee, it's like, what? Come on.
Yeah,
Man.
that's madness. Coffee is great.
Coffee. You guys have Costa. I like Costa. I like Nero. Is Nero an English company?
Yes.
By the way, see, Lori would know this. Nero is not just Emperor Nero. There's Nero, the general who defied orders and intercepted Hasdrubal, Hannibal's brother, coming down the Alps, chopped his head off, and had his men throw his head into Hannibal's camp. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
And he could have been executed for breaking rank and doing that, but I think in light of what it accomplished, I think they like him. Gethyn Jones, everyone. Thank you so much, Gethyn. Anytime, let me know you want to come on. You have something to say. And everybody in the link that I posted for the show, the link prior to this, there are links to 2 books that Gethyn is a writer in and his blog as well. So jump into science, folks. I'm addicted. That's it. I'm going to become a Newtonian.
Modified Newtonian dynamicist.
Dynamicist, right? You don't know the gravity of my theory. Anyway, thank you so much, Gethyn. Love you.
Pleasure, Eric. Thank you very much.
Take care. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.